The world of hip-hop is no stranger to drama. But when it involves legendary figures like Cameron, Jim Jones, and Chrissy Lampkin, the stakes skyrocket to a whole new level. Just when fans thought things had calmed down between these Harlem icons, Cameron dropped a bombshell that has left everyone stunned. This isn't just another petty argument or casual shade thrown on social media. This is an explosive leak that touches nerves, reveals secrets, and has fans glued to their screens wondering what really went down behind the scenes. For years, the story of Jim Jones and Chrissy has been one of love, loyalty, and resilience, while Cameron's history with the Diplomats has been filled with triumphs, betrayals, and larger-than-life personalities. But when private words and unexpected receipts are leaked to the public, even the strongest bonds can shake. Imagine the tension when the Harlem Brotherhood you thought was unbreakable suddenly looks fragile. And the woman who has stood by Jim Jones for decades is caught in the middle of revelations she never expected. What did Cameron reveal that had Chrissy and Jim completely blindsided? Why are fans saying this might change everything we thought we knew about their relationships, their loyalty, and their legacies? Buckle up, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a roller coaster of betrayal, love, fame, and explosive truths that could shake Harlem's foundation to its core. When the news first began to circulate that Cameron had leaked something explosive, fans weren't sure whether to take it seriously or dismiss it as another attention-grabbing move in the never-ending saga of Harlem rap drama. But it didn't take long before the whispers grew into a roar, and suddenly the internet was on fire. Social media timelines lit up with speculation, memes, and heated debates. Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok became battlefields where fans took sides. Some defending Cameron for speaking his truth, others accusing him of betrayal, and many just eager to see what tea had finally been spilled. At the center of it all stood Jim Jones, the Harlem rapper known as Capo, and his longtime partner Chrissy Lampkin, a woman who has been by his side for decades through highs, lows, and every twist in between. To understand why this leak felt like an earthquake, you have to remember the history. Jim Jones and Cameron weren't just collaborators, they were brothers in music. Part of the same Harlem DNA that gave rise to the Diplomats, better known as Dipset, together with Juelz Santana and Freaky Zeke. They dominated the early 2000s with their swagger, their style, and their unapologetic presence in hip-hop. Fans celebrated them as a family, a movement, a brand that couldn't be broken. But as with so many success stories, cracks began to show. Over the years, tensions rose between Cam and Jim, sometimes surfacing in interviews, other times spilling into public spats. Yet, no matter how rough it got, there was always a lingering sense that, deep down, the love and loyalty of Harlem brothers could never truly fade. That's why this latest move from Cameron shocked so many, because it felt like crossing a line that couldn't be erased. According to those who saw the leak firsthand, Cameron didn't just release a casual diss or throwaway comment. He came with receipts, messages, stories, and details that seemed deeply personal. And the most striking part, Chrissy's name was in the mix. For years, Chrissy has been celebrated not just as Jim's ride or die, but also as a strong personality in her own right, thanks in part to her unforgettable role on Love and Hip Hop. She's been portrayed as the foundation of Jim's life, the woman who held him down when the industry tried to pull him away, the partner who demanded respect in a world where loyalty is rare. So when Cameron's words painted a different picture, one of tension, secrets, and unexpected revelations, it was more than just gossip. It was an attack on the very core of Jim and Chrissy's bond. Fans immediately began dissecting what it all meant. Some argued that Cam was only speaking out because of unresolved resentment, grudges from years past that never truly healed. Others speculated that maybe he had grown tired of holding on to information he believed the world deserved to know. Whatever the motivation, the fallout was instant. Jim was blindsided, sources close to him claimed, and Chrissy was said to be in shock. After all, when someone you once called a brother airs private truths, the hurt cuts deeper than any enemy could manage. What made the leak even more devastating was the timing. Jim Jones had been enjoying a resurgence of sorts, appearing more active in music and business ventures, while also showing a softer, family-oriented side on social media. Chrissy, meanwhile, had been focused on her own projects, maintaining a balance between independence and partnership. To have their names suddenly dragged into a scandal not of their making was like having the rug pulled out from under them. The Harlem streets, Kay, always buzzing with chatter, became a chorus of opinions. OG fans who grew up on Dipset classics expressed disappointment, saying that this wasn't the brotherhood they remembered. Younger fans who only knew the crew through memes and nostalgic shoutouts saw it as yet another messy chapter in the never-ending saga of hip-hop beefs. But for Jim and Chrissy, this wasn't entertainment, it was their lives, their reputations, and their relationship on the line. Imagine being Chrissy, waking up to find your name trending not because of your business, not because of your love story, but because of something leaked by a man who once stood on stage with your fiancé, rocking the same colors, sharing the same dreams. For someone who has prided herself on loyalty, on holding her man down through thick and thin, to be blindsided by someone from the inside must have been a gut punch. The shock, insiders said, was not just about what was revealed, but about who revealed it. Meanwhile, Kamran, never one to back down from controversy, seemed unfazed by the backlash. In fact, he thrived in it. His confidence in the face of outrage only fueled the narrative that he knew exactly what he was doing. Whether it was calculated revenge, an emotional outburst, or simply a way to remind the world that he still had the power to shake the culture. Cameron's move worked. Everyone was talking about him again. And not just in passing, but beneath the surface. The real damage was beginning to take shape. Friendships that had already been fragile were now dangling by a thread. Jim and Cam's brotherhood, already tested by years of misunderstandings, now faced its toughest trial yet. And for Chrissy, who has spent much of her life in the shadow of hip-hop spotlight, the emotional weight of being thrust into this drama was immeasurable. The first part of this story is not just about what was leaked, but about the ripple effect it created. It exposed not just private truths, but the vulnerability of relationships built on trust, loyalty, and shared history. And as fans debated whether Kamran had gone too far, one thing became clear. The Harlem unity that Dipset once symbolized would never be seen in the same light again. As the dust from the initial shock began to settle, conversations surrounding Kamran's leak didn't fade. They grew louder, spreading like wildfire across podcasts, YouTube channels, and gossip blogs. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion, from industry insiders to casual fans who only remembered Dipset from their heyday. The narrative shifted from curiosity about what was said to deeper questions about loyalty, brotherhood, and the sacrifices made in the name of fame. For Jim Jones and Chrissy, the pressure was mounting. Not only did they have to deal with the personal sting of betrayal, but they also had to perform under the public's gaze, where every move, every reaction, and every silence became part of the story. Behind the scenes, sources whispered about heated conversations between Jim and his inner circle. Some of his closest friends urged him to retaliate, to clap back at Kamran with his own version of the truth, while others advised him to remain quiet, to let the storm pass before it consumed him entirely. For Jim, it was more complicated than just firing shots. This was a man he had grown up with, someone he once called a brother. Fighting enemies was easy, fighting family, even former family, was a different kind of war. Meanwhile, Chrissy found herself in an uncomfortable spotlight. She had always been known as the strong woman who stood firm in the midst of chaos, but this was different. This wasn't a storyline created for television drama, nor was it a disagreement that could be solved with a heart-to-heart. This was a public revelation from someone she barely expected to drag her name into the mud. The whispers about her loyalty, her role in Jim's career, and her influence on his decisions became louder. Fans debated whether Chrissy had been the reason for past tensions between Jim and Cam, while others defended her fiercely, arguing that blaming a woman for conflicts between men was a tired and unfair trope. The beauty and pain of hip-hop culture is that it exists in the public eye, It thrives on narratives, on larger-than-life personalities, and on conflicts that fans can consume like chapters in a never-ending soap opera. But for those inside the storm, it's never entertainment, it's personal. Jim Jones, who had built his legacy on resilience and survival, suddenly found himself in a position where survival meant protecting not just his music, but his family, his relationship, and his reputation. Industry veterans began to weigh in. Some reminded the public of the countless times Dipset had fractured and reunited, pointing out that perhaps this was just another chapter in a long saga of brotherhood tested by fame. Others, however, suggested that this time the damage might be irreparable. Cameron's leak wasn't just a diss track or a throwaway interview, it was a calculated release of information that hit where it hurt most. And in hip-hop, when wounds are made public, they are far harder to heal. Chrissy's reaction, or rather, her lack of immediate response, spoke volumes. Known for her outspoken nature, her decision to remain quiet only fueled speculation. Was she too stunned to speak? Was she strategizing her response? Or was the silence itself a form of resistance, a way of refusing to give Cam the satisfaction of seeing her rattled? Whatever the case, her composure under scrutiny reminded many of why she had been a compelling figure on television. She embodied strength, even in moments when the world expected her to crack. Cameron, on the other hand, continued to fuel the fire. Through cryptic posts and sly comments, he kept the conversation alive, ensuring that his name remained at the center of the drama. He seemed to relish the chaos, reminding the world of the unapologetic persona that made him a legend in the first place. To his supporters, Cam was simply being Cam-bold, unfiltered, and unwilling to play by anyone else's rules. To his critics, he was a man who had allowed bitterness to overshadow brotherhood. The most heartbreaking element, however, was the sense of betrayal that hung in the air. Fans who had grown up idolizing Dipset as a symbol of Harlem pride felt like their heroes had let them down. For many, the diplomatic immunity era represented more than just music. It was an identity, a movement, a declaration that Harlem's voice mattered. To see that legacy tarnished by internal strife left a bitter taste. And while some fans clung to hope that reconciliation was possible, others resigned themselves to the reality that some bonds, once broken, can never be repaired. Jim Jones, ever the strategist, began to navigate the storm in his own way. He appeared in interviews with carefully chosen words, never giving too much, but also never denying his disappointment. His body language told stories. His words did not cross arms, weary expressions, a look in his eyes that betrayed the hurt of being attacked by someone he once considered family. He seemed to be weighing every response carefully, knowing that whatever he said would not just impact him, but also Chrissy, who had already endured enough public scrutiny for one lifetime. The leak became more than just gossip, became a mirror reflecting the fragility of relationships. In an industry built on ego and competition, it raised questions about what loyalty means when money, fame, and pride are on the line. It reminded fans that behind the bravado and luxury cars and flashy jewelry are human beings, with feelings, insecurities, and wounds that no amount of success can heal. As the days stretched into weeks, the conversation refused to die down. Commentators analyzed every word, every gesture, and every silence. Some claimed that Jim and Chrissy were presenting a united front behind closed doors, refusing to let the leak divide them. Others suggested that the tension was taking its toll and that cracks were beginning to show. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. What was undeniable, however, was that their love story, once celebrated as unbreakable, was now being tested in ways neither of them had ever imagined. And yet, through all the noise, one thing became increasingly clear. This wasn't just about Cameron versus Jim Jones. It wasn't. It's just about Chrissy Lampkin's name being dragged into the spotlight. It was about legacy, about the Harlem story that Dipset had written together, and about the painful reality that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who can wound you the deepest. The stage was set for an even more intense chapter, one that would determine not just the future of these relationships, but also how history would remember them by the time the dust began to truly settle. The Qumran leak had transformed from a scandal into a cultural moment, one that forced everyone involved to confront the truth about legacy, loyalty, and the price of fame. For Jim Jones and Chrissy, the initial shock had worn off, but the ripple effects continued to shape their days. They were no longer simply a couple navigating the ups and downs of a long-term relationship under the public eye. They were now unwilling characters in a story that refused to fade. The streets of Harlem buzzed with every rumor, every whisper, and every Instagram live that hinted at where things might go next. Jim Jones, ever the fighter, leaned into his resilience. He had survived too much in his career and his life to let one leak define him. But even as he presented strength to the outside world, those close to him knew the truth. This had cut deeper than any diss track, any industry slight, any financial setback. This wasn't just business, it was personal, and it involved the one woman who had been his anchor for decades. When someone attacked Chrissy, directly or indirectly, it felt like an attack on him too. That made Cam's move not just disrespectful, but unforgivable in Jim's eyes. Chrissy, on the other hand, displayed the grace and composure that had become her trademark. She refused to give Cam the satisfaction of a messy public outburst. Instead, she carried herself with dignity, showing fans that silence can be more powerful than words. To her supporters, Chrissy emerged from the drama stronger than a Vera woman who would not be broken by betrayal or shaken by gossip. She embodied the truth that sometimes the best clapback is refusing to engage at all. Still, behind that silence was a woman dealing with the sting of public humiliation, trying to protect her relationship while grappling with the betrayal of someone she never thought would cross that line. Cameron, meanwhile, remained unapologetic. To him, this was part of the game, a game he had mastered long ago. His fans saw it as vintage Cam, unfiltered and unwilling to play nice. Critics saw it as bitterness, a man unwilling to let go of grudges that no longer served him. But either way, he had accomplished his goal. He had reminded the world that Cameron was still a force, still capable of commanding headlines, still able to shift the narrative whenever he chose. The only question left was whether the damage he caused was worth the price he paid in relationships and respect. The larger hip-hop community couldn't look away. For some, this was just another chapter in the endless cycle of beefs, reconciliations, and betrayals that make up the culture. But for others, it was a sobering reminder of how fragile legacies really are. The Dipset story had once been a tale of triumph, of Harlem pride rising to dominate the rap world. Now it was becoming a cautionary tale about how fame and ego can tear apart even the closest of bonds. As time passed, Jim and Chrissy began to reclaim their narrative. They showed unity on social media, posted moments of love and laughter, and reminded their supporters that their bond was not so easily shaken. For them, survival meant leaning on each other, blocking out the noise, and proving that no leak, no betrayal, no outside force could destroy what they had built. And though the whispers of tension continued, their ability to move forward spoke louder than any rumor ever could. The fans, however, weren't so easily satisfied. They wanted answers, closure, perhaps even a reunion between Cam and Jim. They wanted to believe that Harlem unity could be restored, that the Dipset brotherhood could somehow be salvaged. But the truth was murkier. Reconciliation, if it ever came, would not erase the hurt or the betrayal. Some scars remain no matter how much time passes, and some relationships simply cannot return to what they once were. And yet, the beauty of hip-hop is its unpredictability. Today's enemies can become tomorrow's collaborators, and rivalries that once seemed permanent can dissolve in an instant. Whether Jim and Cam would ever find their way back to brotherhood remained uncertain, but the story was far from over. Fans knew that as long as these men walked the streets of Harlem, their paths would remain forever intertwined. For Chrissy, the ordeal reinforced her role as the glue holding everything together. She had been tested in front of millions and emerged stronger. Her story became a symbol for women everywhere who stand by their partners through storms, only to find themselves dragged into battles they never asked for. In her strength, fans found inspiration, and in her silence, they found wisdom. She proved that not every attack requires a counterattack, and that sometimes dignity speaks louder than rage. In the end, what made Kamran's explosive leak so powerful wasn't just the details it revealed, but the truths it forced everyone to confront. It reminded fans that fame doesn't protect you from betrayal. It reminded artists that legacy is fragile, that one move can reshape how history remembers you. And it reminded Jim and Chrissy that their love story, no matter how strong, would always be tested in ways most couples could never imagine. The final chapter of this saga hasn't been written yet. Maybe reconciliation will come. Maybe it won't. Maybe the Dipset legacy will be remembered as a story of triumph marred by betrayal. Or maybe it will be remembered as proof that even in the face of division, Harlem's pride still stands tall. But one thing is certain, the explosive leak changed everything. It shifted perceptions, rattled relationships, and reminded the world why hip-hop drama continues to captivate us all. Continues to captivate us all. Because in the end, this isn't just about music. It's about brotherhood, about loyalty, about the unspoken bonds that hold people together until they don't. It's about the choices we make when hurt, the consequences of betrayal, and the resilience required to survive in the spotlight. Kamran's leak may have shocked the world, but its aftermath revealed something even deeper. The truth that in hip-hop, as in life, the people closest to you often hold the power to either build you up or break you down. And in this case, the cracks revealed will never truly disappear, no matter how much time passes. And now, after everything we've uncovered, the question remains, where does the story go from here? Kamran's explosive leak may have shaken the foundation of Harlem's most iconic brotherhood, but it has also left us with a powerful reminder. Legacies are fragile. Loyalty is priceless, and sometimes the ones closest to us hold the sharpest knives. Jim Jones and Chrissy stood tall through the storm, proving that love and resilience can outlast even the most public betrayals. But this is just one chapter in a saga that continues to evolve. And you better believe there will be more twists, more revelations, and more moments that will keep us all talking. If you've been hooked by the drama, the history, and the raw emotion behind this story, make sure you don't miss what comes next. Hit that like button if you believe in loyalty. Drop a comment with your thoughts on whether Cam went too far. And tell us, do you think Jim and Cam will ever reconcile? Or is this the final nail in the coffin of Dipset unity? And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the hip-hop world moves fast and the next chapter could drop at any moment. Stay tuned, stay locked in, and remember, when Harlem speaks, the whole world listens.